1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock.
My guest today is a guitarist, a singer, a songwriter. He builds guitars. He has his own studio. In fact, he's a little bit of a Superman. Welcome to the show, Graham. It's Graham Wardrop.
It's very nice to be here.
I'm so pleased we finally caught up.
Well, I'm probably out of town more than I'm in town these days, so timing was good. I'm away again in the morning, and I've only been home since Sunday, so...
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Graham, before we came on air, we had a chance to chat and you raised some interesting things. And just to catch on something that we've never struck before, building guitars.
I'm just a guitar nut from start to finish. From when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was play guitar. And here I am still doing that, so I'm very lucky. But about 25 years ago, I was living in Sydney, and a friend upstairs who was also a guitarist, he was 6'6" and had huge hands, got sick of playing normal guitars because they kind of looked like a ukulele on him. And he decided he'd build himself an electric guitar and a bass guitar. And so I used to go up each day and watch what he's doing. I was fascinated. I thought, gee, you can do this. And so, yeah, I got roped into it and started building little, solid body instruments. And I've kept progressing. And now I'm building acoustic guitars and playing my own guitars in concerts and things. And getting commissions to build guitars now. Because
that is a real art, isn't it?
Well, I think the building of a guitar is more as a craft. I think anyone could, learn the technical skills required in woodworking to build a guitar. Where it becomes an art, I think, is getting the sound out of the instrument. That's where the art comes in.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful stuff. The guitar is such a complete instrument. You're never alone when you've got a guitar.
You have no reason to be bored.
No.
It's a great way to waste a bit of time. And you can cart it around with you. I mean, I don't really go too many places without taking a guitar with me. And,
it's hard to carry a piano, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. I'm looking at some of my little notes here, and it was very interested to hear that you started at the age 10.
I started playing the guitar at the age of 10. My sister and I were given a guitar by a dear auntie who's since passed away. She used to sing with her sister, and they used to do live-to-air broadcasts in Dunedin, and probably I'd say in about the 30s and 40s, a long time ago. But she had a guitar, was away under the bed, and eventually she knew we were interested, and she gave us her guitar. So my sister and I, we went mad on it. We just loved it. And my sister was really good at working out quite complex chords and things, and I was good at working out melodies, and we used to sing a lot of harmonies and play a lot of music together.
The thing that intrigued me is another thing is that you talked about Dunedin. So you're a Dunedin born and bred? I was
Dunedin born and bred, yeah. I went to Otago Boys High, and then I went to university in Otago. I studied an accounting degree, but wasn't the right choice for me.
No, I can see you're a musician from the tips of your fingers.
I've got about half of a degree. I did all right in economics and the geography and the mathematics parts of things, but this pure accounting was just not my thing.
No, it takes a special kind of mind, and it's not a musician normally.
I found the social life much more interesting.
You did mention that you played at 14 in a band.
The first band I played in, was when I was about 14, and we used to play. The two of the guys were at university, and so they used to get us gigs at university functions, and some of our teachers from school were at those functions, and so when I went to school the next day, I knew why they had bloodshot eyes, and they knew why I was maybe a little tired.
I hope it gave you an edge.
That was quite the right kind of edge, but...
I'm thinking about the time that you grew up. When and how did you grow up?
In Dunedin, my parents had a variety of businesses, and Dad went from a family business into his own business, which was a 7-day shop, and then a bookshop, and amidst all of that, my mum and dad were very good at renovating houses, and so consequently we moved. I've lost count, but it was probably something like 14 or 15 times in my first 17 or 18 years. So we moved all around Dunedin. I love my parents. They're wonderful. They've always been wonderful. They're still around. They live in Christchurch now, and they're not as young as they were, but they have young minds. and very musical. One thing I always remember, and I think it had a huge bearing on my musicality and my sister's musicality, was in the 50s, we used to have a holiday house up in Central Otago, and you didn't have radio in car, you didn't even have a heater in the car, I don't think. And we'd go driving up to Alexandra, and Dad would teach us singing in the car, and we would sing. He'd teach us to sing harmonies. We used to do things like Greensleeves and You Are My Sunshine, and some of those really old pieces, but in 4-part harmonies. And my mum would sing the melody, Dad would sing the bass, I'd sing the one above the melody, and my sister would do the high one. And I loved those sessions. You know, they were something very, very special, and there was a lot of music in the family.
And we have mentioned your sister several times, but not her name.
My sister's name she was originally Linda Wardrop, and she's since changed her name to Rada. And she has partners in a recording studio in Wellington. She composes, and she's won the New Zealand Music Awards for children's music several times. And I still do a lot of work with her in her studio, playing guitar on various projects that she has. So she's still very active in the music thing, but as a composer.
Have you ever looked into your family tree to see whether it goes back further? Because it sounds to me as though you're a very musical family.
There's a lot of music on both sides of the family. Apparently one of my ancestors in Scotland was hung for sheep stealing and played the violin.
Oh my goodness.
Before he was hung. My great-grandmother was a concert pianist, and I'm going down to Alexandra tomorrow, actually, and I'm going to be recording my auntie, my dad's sister, who writes a lot of music, and in actual fact won Studio One. If you remember that television series, she won it twice, 2 years in a row, with a couple of songs she wrote that Tony Williams sang. And I'm going down to record some of her compositions. So, there's music in the family right through.
It stands out. For those of you who've just joined us, I'm Cecile, and I'm talking to Graham Wardrop. And Graham is really bringing up some interesting differences from the music things that we talk about, in the fact that he makes guitars, he writes songs, he plays guitar, he sings. In fact, he's a little bit of everything.
Hopefully not just a jack of all trades.
No, but it seems as though that you're doing recordings and concerts and everything like that, so that is definitely a thing that is not the norm. Do you love it?
Yes, I love it. I never wanted to do anything but play the guitar, but things have expanded, and I was manic about playing the guitar for a long time and didn't really focus on anything but the guitar. And I suppose that gave me the skills to be able to go out and do concerts and do what I'm doing. But my interests have expanded, over the last, 20 years or so. I've, interested in guitar building and sound engineering, and even photography and the design of albums. And I'm now recording other people as well as myself. But I keep, the passion is always actually playing the guitar. And lately, my life it's been really lovely. The last couple of years, my work has been more concerts than just playing in restaurants and things. I do a lot of work, a lot of travelling. This year I've played in Hong Kong, Canada, Australia, and I'm going back to Hong Kong to do New Year's Eve. I do a lot of travelling, a lot of concert work, and I really love it.
You have on the desk here in front of us a re-release. Tell me about the band, the music, and all about it. Well,
the band I have here is a band I was in Dunedin from, not just Dunedin, but we actually played a lot in Christchurch too. The band was called Luther, and we were together from 1970 to 1973. And we did 2 albums of music for EMI, or HMV, I think they were called at the time. Peter Dawkins produced the first one, and Mike LePettit did the second. And we wrote all of that music. Now, we were the first Dunedin band to actually release original music. The Dunedin sound gained attention in the 70s and 80s, but in actual fact, we were doing that a long time before any of that attention came around. EMI recently have decided to include us in their collection of New Zealand popular music heritage, and they've put both of those albums onto a CD. They've given us a huge amount of freedom in terms of how the product looks, and I wrote about 50% of the songs, and the singer and a friend of his, Gordon Spittle, wrote the other half of the songs. Now, Gordon, who's a journalist, has written a little 12-page booklet with a history of the band, and there's all sorts of interesting things in there. It's quite exciting. It's
Are you going to put it up on a web page?
I'm going to actually, when I get a chance, I'm going to put a page onto my own website. I have my own website, but I'm going to put a Luther page on there.
Now, your website is what?
www.grahamwardrop.com.
Good. Mm-hmm. So the listeners will be able to have a look at it, and have you got any music on it that you can download?
I just have sound bites.
Right.
But my CDs, I've got, I think, 5 or 6 CDs available on there, and there's a couple of, sound bites from each CD.
That's great, because then you can have a listen to it's your type of music or it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And I must admit that the cover looks absolutely lovely with that old house that you're leaning against the tree there.
That was in Wellington. I can't remember where, but that photo actually won an award, and I can't say exactly what it was, but apparently it won an award as a portrait.
How wonderful.
So
yes.
It's just that we were also good looking.
Yes. Now, I'm looking at some of our notes here, because it was really interesting in the fact that you said that you had a passion for fingerstyle. Now, tell me about that.
Well, fingerstyle guitar is trying to play the guitar like a piano. So I'm not going to require a bass player or a drummer or anything else. Hopefully I can play a song and it can sound like a complete piece. In other words, I'm using a lot of classical guitar techniques, but I'm playing them on a steel string guitar. And if I have to, I can play an entire night of instrumentals. And I've had to do that. Occasionally I've had maybe lost my voice or had a bad cold. I can play a lot of instrumentals. And one interesting point where I wasn't allowed to sing was I did the opening for Michael Crawford when he was in New Zealand. We did several shows, and part of the contract was that we weren't allowed to sing.
Isn't that interesting? I was talking to Pat Cairns, and he was saying he wasn't allowed to make jokes when.
Well, knowing Pat, I'm not surprised.
Billy Connolly's show, that his contract said he wasn't allowed to make jokes.
Yeah, similar thing. And actually, it's a very good ploy. And it didn't worry me, because I've got a good repertoire of instrumental pieces, and also Gray Bartlett joined me on stage, and we played a few duets and things. So that was all good. But I just love the sound of the guitar. As a pure instrument, I'll arrange jazz tunes or pop tunes or write instrumental pieces for the guitar just so that they sound complete.
For those of you who've joined us, I'm Cecile, and I'm talking to Graham Wardrop, and he is telling us a little tiny bit of his very interesting life. I asked earlier on, and now I'm asking you, have you got any sort of special high points? Something when you're getting ready to pass over the other side, this is the moment that you remember?
Well, there's probably a lot of high points, and each of them would relate to a particular act I was working with at the time. I think, working with Luther, doing these recordings was a high point. That was something new and exciting at the time. In Australia, after Luther, I moved to Australia, and I worked with a whole lot of different people, and probably the most prominent one was Slim Dusty. And some of the outbacks situations we found ourselves in were fantastic and unique.
The sort of things that you read about or see on telly, were they?
Well, for instance, I mean, this is not a high point, but it was just, I thought it was amusing. We were doing shows from going out in Queensland out to Mount Isa, and we got out to Julia Creek, and it was in September, and my wife was travelling with us, and the drummer and my wife and I were desperate to have a swim. We were just so hot. It was like 100 and something in the shade, and we asked the motel manager where the swimming pool was. He said, it's just down the road, round to your left, and then to your right, and through a gate, and there's the swimming pool. He said, but there's no bloody water in it because it's winter.
Well, yes, I can understand that.
But one of the high points with the Dusty family was we also worked with Anne Kirkpatrick, who's Slim's daughter. Did a lot of work with Anne, and in actual fact, she's just recorded one of my songs on her new album. But we performed at the Opera House on New Year's Eve on the steps of the Opera House. There was a crowd of, I think it was 200,000 people there. And we had to be shipped across from the North Shore in through the tunnels underneath the Opera House.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it was just fantastic. That was also televised, and I think there was around Asia, and it was an estimated audience of millions. Can't remember. Some of those gigs were incredible. Opening for Manhattan Transfer recently, that was pretty exciting, and during the Pacemakers, Michael Crawford, and yeah.
You mentioned that you went to Canada. Why did you go to Canada?
Well, I made acquaintance with a Canadian singer-songwriter by the name of Voldy, who was in New Zealand very briefly in 1994. We got together and just sat down and played guitars. It felt like we'd been playing together forever. He's pretty well known over there. And the folk club here in Christchurch gave me the wonderful opportunity last year. They said, we would like to, they said, we've heard you play with this one and that one, and who would you like to play with? And I said, well, I'd really like to play with Voldy. So they went, well, we'll pay his fares over here and we'll sit and listen to you play together. So I organised a tour through the country and we finished up at the folk festival here, and we had just a fabulous time. And then Voldy organised a tour in Canada for us, and I went there in May, and we did 10 concerts together, and also were joined by another lady over there called Kathy Stack, who I'm hoping will come to New Zealand sometime and I can do some work with her. So it was a reciprocal thing, and it was really lovely, and he's asked me if I'd be interested in going back again next year. So
it sounds as though you've had a little experience with festivals and things.
Festivals are wonderful because they have a variety of guests, and what I love most about festivals is that most of those guests all get together and play music together. And the Canterbury Festival here this year was just wonderful in that respect. All of the acts just got together, and we had 10-piece bands on stage at times, and we did just a fantastic time.
It's a wonderful time for the audience as well as the musicians. It really is, isn't it? And it seems to be growing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of young people starting to get into it too, that I think are actually beginning to realise that you can play musical instruments. You don't have to just hit a button and listen or compose or sequence stuff on a computer. They actually really like that tactile thing of fingers on strings.
Yes, it's interesting because often people it reaches a point and swings back, and the real interaction between musicians in a live situation, it's very hard to explain it, but it's great to explore it and be part of it.
That's what it's all about. I don't think you can explain it. I think you have to experience it.
Yes, I must say I'm very disappointed to hear that you won't be around when we have our festival of rock and roll next March, because you're involved in something else elsewhere.
That's right, I'm afraid so, yeah. And my life's been a bit that way lately. I've a lot of things happening around different parts of the country and even overseas. So, I've had to say no to quite a few things. Yes,
well, we might be able to put your picture up there as sort of one of these interactive things. Say, hi, wish I was there.
yeah.
We've walked around your life a little bit, but tell us something about Graham the man.
Well, what can I say about me? I'm very happily married. I think a lot of the fact that I'm doing what I'm doing is attributable to the fact that my wife is totally supportive of what I do, and our focus has never been on accumulating wealth. Our focus has been on lifestyle, and if it wasn't for Faye, I'd be hard pressed to be doing what I'm doing now. So we consider ourselves to be lifestyle rich. We have 2 children. They're both grown up. I consider I was lucky because I worked mainly at night, and when my children were growing up, I think I probably got more time with my children than a lot of fathers do. I was away a lot, but when I was at home, I was always at home when they got home from school.
And are they musical?
They're musical. Then neither of them are interested in doing a performance thing, but my daughter's quite a good piano player and has a beautiful voice, although she's very shy about it. And my son has a beautiful sense of rhythm in terms of, he played drums, he had a wee band there for a while, but they've got, and stuck into their own life. My son actually completes a physics degree this year, and my daughter is, she's been working in a law office, and they've got their lives.
Quite different from where you came from, and that's interesting because that often is the case. Because when a parent has a high profile in a particular area, then the children seem to shy off a little bit from that.
I feel that's happened. Because we've had a lot of times when we've been pretty broke, people see I've got CDs out now, they sort of assume that I'm rich and famous sometimes, but it's not really like that in New Zealand. And
I can attest to that. Yeah. I did like that lifestyle rich bit. I thought Dion and I would really enjoy that phrase.
Yeah.
And that has been interesting in the fact, Dion and I were lucky in the fact we started at 15 and we made a decision to withdraw a few years ago, but now we've been dragged back into it.
It's a hard thing to get away from, isn't it?
It's just wonderful. And I think people say you've had such interesting lives, and that was it. Well, Graham, and isn't it? Yes, money won't keep you warm in your grave.
Yeah. I think you have to be passionate about something, and if you're lucky enough to be able to eke a living out of the thing that you're passionate about, then you're a very lucky person.
I can see the smile. I want to thank you very much for coming and sharing with us. Are you 50 plus and loving it?
I was 55 last Wednesday, and I'm having a ball.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later, alligator.